Donald Trump is the middle finger manifested in human form. The individuals who support him, they might support him for other reasons as well, but I do think that one of the dominant reasons is that it's giving a middle finger to our political establishment, to our institution. A lot of Americans feel like those institutions and the political establishment has let them down, whether we're talking about the Democratic establishment or the Republican establishment.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Where John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
You know, John, a wise man once said, better late than never. Have you ever heard that before, John?
I have heard that before. Was that wise man Brad Hildebrand?
I don't think it was. I'm anything but a wise man. That is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. Every single day he goes to work for 22 plus years now. Goes to work, and is it 22 or 23? 22?
23, Brad. We eclipsed that October mark.
That's right. And you won't tell me what day it was. Okay, 23 years in the making. Every single day he goes to work. He puts together this list of all the important stories that you should be paying attention to across the state of Missouri. We start off the show with this guy by the name of, what's his name again?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
Now on with the countdown.
Counts them down, and we start off with John's number.
In third place,
the Whistle Stop Tour might be dead for candidates, but the Ford F-150 campaign tour lives on. That's right, Brad. Scott Fawn's annual F-150 campaign tour is in full swing across Missouri. Now, every 2 years with the elections, Scott Fawn gets in his truck, drives around the state of Missouri before the primary and then before the general election, and has candidates hop on in the truck, talk a little bit about their race. Scott goes around, has a bar at the local has a beer at the local watering hole, and just has a chat with candidates about what they're hearing at the doors. Scott was on Pete Mundo's show yesterday in Kansas City, gave an overview of what he's hearing from candidates, what he's hearing from voters, and explained a little bit about what he thinks is going to happen next Tuesday. Today on my website, Brad, I linked to, the full F-150 campaign tour. Today, Scott Fawn is scheduled to be in the St. Louis area. He'll be in St. Charles County. He's doing Reardon's show. He's going to do Wendy Wies's show. It's a Wendy and Frank show. I guess that's Frank Cusimano on KTRS. And the full schedule is up. So I would suggest folks go check it out. I also have a link up to the Sunday show when Scott sat down with incoming Governor Mike Kehoe, talked about the campaign. And then he also chatted with a couple state Senate candidates from the western part of the state. So that's story number 3, Brad, the F-150 campaign tour brought to you by Ford.
Scott should go out on westbound 70 at the 79 exit and sit in traffic like the traffic jam every day to go to get voting. It's nuts.
It is, and I thought of you yesterday, Brad, because I was driving down Clarkson Road. There's the Daniel Boone Library, which is a popular place to vote absentee in St. Louis. And I looked over there and I thought, I'm kind of in a hurry. I don't have much time, but maybe I'll swing by and vote. Brad, they were parked for folks who know the area. You know the area well.
Oh, yeah.
The cars were lined up through the shopping center, which is next door. There's a Chick-fil-A. As far as the eye could see, Brad, there were cars parked. And then I looked in the parking lot, and cars were circling like vultures, just in desperation, trying to find a parking spot. It is nuts. I've obviously never seen an early voting situation like that before.
Now, you're talking about the one on Clarkson there, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Near Clarkson and Clayton Road, on Clarkson Road between Manchester and Clayton Road.
Right. And it's on the west side of Clarkson. Yeah, yesterday I had 3 different people either call me or text me and go, you're not going to believe what's going on westbound 70. Traffic is lined up down the ramp. Because if you know the way that works, you exit there at westbound 70 at 79, you go up the ramp, you make a right turn, you go north on 79, and you go north, maybe I don't know, maybe 1/8 mile or something like that, and you turn into that street, which is, I can never remember the name of that street. Is that Turner? I'll have to look that up.
It is Turner. It's located at 397 Turner Boulevard, Brad.
Right, and it's like an industrial complex. Matter of fact, a lot of people might know it because of the fact the first tenant on the left there is the what is that? The Anheuser-Busch distributor. I think that's Cry Distributing out in St. Charles County. So it's okay now. Has Scott Fawn talked about this, about where all these people coming from with this? And I would assume this is going on all over the state. Is this just a St. Louis County, St. Charles County kind of deal?
Well, Scott brought up a really good point, which was that Republicans were really slow to embrace early voting. And Brad, I'll put myself in that category as well, because I associate early voting with absentee fraud and Democrat vote turnout operations. To answer your question, Scott didn't talk about the lines. He wasn't focused on, the length of lines when you're voting early. But Scott's point is Republicans might as well embrace it. Republicans were slow to embrace it. But there's a lot of folks, it might not affect rural areas so much because, if you're voting in a rural area, you might have to wait 20 minutes to vote. But if you're in a suburban area, you just don't have time to wait an hour in a line, whether you're voting early or whether you're voting on Election Day.
Well, Kurt Barr, once again, you're going to say, well, Brad, you're biased against Kurt Barr. Kurt Barr, I think, has been caught sleeping on this deal because of the fact that yesterday, I don't know where I heard it, but he said that somebody was quoting him as saying, well, we thought there was only going to be 10% of the people, and right now we think this might be 25 to 30%. Now, why can't you ratchet that up? And not only that, St. Louis County has 14 different locations? St. Charles County has 2. Now, I do realize that St. Louis County has more than double the population of St. Charles County, but still, don't you think? And I guess the thing that's sort of interesting is both of the locations in St. Charles County are along 70. Don't you think they'd put one down like on 64 or something like that, like in the Lake St. Louis area or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. And, when you're planning events like this, or when you're planning logistics, we all have a tendency to think about what could go wrong and what happens if nobody shows up or there's no attendance. You also have to plan on what happens if whatever the event is an outrageous success. And so in some ways, you look at the early voting, it's an outrageous success. If I was Kurt Barr, I'd be taking credit for the fact that so many people are voting early and then figuring out some kind of a way to deal with these lines. It's ridiculous, Brad.
See, John, you're the ultimate PR flack guy because what you just said, Kurt Barr could take lemons and squeeze them and make it into lemonade because he could say, well, you know what? I told everybody they should vote early. And you know what? Everybody listened to me. I'm the guy that came out and said, vote early in St. Charles County. But I had no idea how successful I'd be in that campaign, right? That's what he should be saying, right?
You're exactly right. And then to add to that, Brad, on election night, when there's no problems in St. Charles County, we can anticipate there's no violence or no ridiculous lines. He could say, because of our early voting success, we avoided having folks who have no choice but to vote on Election Day. They didn't have to stand in long lines. So this early voting was actually a success.
Yeah, he's had a run of some problems. Matter of fact, they had some issues back in August with the primary where nothing was getting updated, and they said, well, it was a third-party vendor. Okay. So, when you and I have a bad show, we can just say, hey, it was a third-party talk show host that interfered.
We would have to, Brad, we're going to have a long time to wait for us to have a bad show. What are you talking about?
Listen to you. Okay, moving along.
Up a notch to number 2.
The St. Louis Post-Dispatch's Joe Holloman features a race that we haven't talked about in quite a while, Brad. And it's one that we talked about a lot this summer. And it's Wesley Bell's election to U.S. Congress. Now, of course, Wesley Bell defeated incumbent Cori Bush in the primary. He also defeated a woman named Maria Chappelle Nadal in that primary. Joe Holloman gives an overview of the general election, which won't be close, and it will be a cakewalk for Wesley Bell. I bring this up, Brad, because we went from talking about the Wesley Bell and Cori Bush race multiple times a week to not even talking about it in the general election. But here's the interesting thing. We're going to be talking a lot about Wesley Bell in January. You know why, Brad?
Because of the fact that he's going to hire a woman to be his security guard, and they're going to get married and live happily ever after in Washington, D.C. Am I close?
You weren't supposed to leak the plot of my new novel. Yes, Brad, that's exactly what's going to happen. And also, in addition to that, a lawsuit that was filed in St. Louis County by a former employee of Wesley Bell's office who alleges age and, I believe, gender discrimination in the prosecutor's office. That will go to trial, or that case will begin in January. Now, we talked about this over the summer, Brad, and it was a saving grace for Wesley Bell was that case was postponed until January, until at least far after the Democratic primary. But it's going to be really messy, Brad, because this is the woman, if you recall, who's an older white woman, and she alleges age discrimination. She was discriminated against, according to her, because she's a woman, also because she is white. And the messy part about this lawsuit is that she is suggesting that Wesley Bell had intimate relations with subordinates in his office. So Republicans have been really quiet about this. Let's not forget that come January, when Wesley Bell is actually a congressman, Republicans will be happy to pile on Wesley Bell. And any Democrat who thought that Republicans might go easy on Wesley Bell because he defeated Cori Bush are sadly mistaken. I think it's going to be really, really ugly, Brad.
The lady filing the suit, is she an attorney? Is she a prosecutor in his office?
She is, yeah. And she alleges that, for example, essentially that Wesley Bell on the professional side, Wesley Bell meddled, according to her, in some of her cases, got plea deals with some black defendants in order to avoid racial controversy. But the real part, and the part that media and Cori Bush supporters will be glomming onto, are these allegations that there was something inappropriate happening in Wesley Bell's office.
But I thought that was just in the county executive office, where what was that assistant to Page was having sex with the woman on the desk, wasn't that? Don't you remember that? Where the video that surfaced of that?
Yeah,
remember?
Well, Brad, I mean, you sent me several remixes of that with your commentary added, so I don't know, but I don't think Wesley Bell would have been able to steady his iPhone to do that. But who knows, Brad? And that's a good callback, by the way. That's a tawdry callback, Brad.
Well, we forget these things, don't we? Okay.
Tawdry Hepburn over there. That's who you're going to be for Halloween. That would be your drag queen name, would be Tawdry Hepburn.
How did you know I was a drag queen? Okay. And last but not least,
the number one.
Brad, anybody who disagrees with you is a Nazi. And that seems to be the mode of Democrats today and Kamala Harris supporters. Eric Schmitt was on Newsmax yesterday talking a little bit about that whole approach that Democrats have of calling their opponents Nazis. And he cited specifically the beautiful, joyous Madison Square Garden rally by Donald Trump and the fact that mainstream media came out and allowed Democrats to call Donald Trump Hitler and call Republicans Nazis when Republicans just want better opportunities for their kids. Eric Schmitt points out that Donald Trump really is the change candidate. And Schmitt went on to talk a little bit about how desperate Democrats are. The phrase he used is he said that while Republicans and Donald Trump are offering hope, Democrats are offering scorn and shame. So I have a link up to it. It was from Newsmax yesterday. It's the top link on my website today, Brad.
I have to be honest with you, John, it's just gotten over the top because it's Nazi, 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 Nazi. And I'm going like, okay, and what's interesting was you should look at the Babylon Bee. What great satire. They have a story in there about how terrible it was that the Nazis were everybody at the Madison Square Garden event for Trump was a Nazi, and yet there's pictures of people holding up Israel flags.
I saw that, Brad.
It's like,
yeah, I mean, it's like the worst Nazi rally ever to have Israel flags.
You got people holding up Israeli flags, and it's a Nazi rally. Okay, if you know your history, those two don't quite go together, but that's a whole other story. Okay, we have to take a break. We will be back.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?